welcome to Turn the Page, the official podcast of the Syosset Public Library.
Hi, this is Jessica with Syosset Library's Turn the Page podcast, and my librarian co-host is
Stacy Mencher, Reader Services Librarian.
And we're super excited to have our guests today. Please tell everyone who you are and about your books.
Hi, Jessica and Stacy. I'm so happy to be here, and I am Caroline Kepnes. I am the author of the You series, and I am here today to talk about my new book, You Love Me, which is the third book about Joe Goldberg, who also loves books and libraries.
The You books are amazing. Providence
They're
is one of my favorite books of all time.
Thank you.
Yeah, I know that's like it's not in the canon that we're talking about now, but it's one of those books that
She loves it so much.
I tell everybody to read it. I'm like, have
thank
you read it?
I love that.
Read it.
Because it's so strange when people wanted that Joe book, and I love Providence. I'm so excited about it, and I get addiction totally. As an addicted person, but so many people were like, "This isn't Joe." I'm like, "But it's something else." So I love to hear that so much. I appreciate that.
So reading the premise of the latest You book, You Love Me, it seems like Joe has turned his affection to a librarian. So
Yes, he has, ladies. Yes.
So I'm not sure whether we
Watch
should
your
be
back.
thanking you or whether we should be a little scared. But
Somewhere in the middle, right?
Of course,
Yeah.
of course. So we absolutely love these books. Tell us a little bit about this upcoming one and how you decided to make Joe's journey go in this direction.
Well, I wanted to come full circle. So right off the bat in this one, he's walking into a library and he's already spoken to the librarian on the phone. He's pulled some strings to be a volunteer. And I loved the idea of him being in this space that belongs to this woman. And he calls her, I think, the mother of books in the first chapter. And he's suddenly like, why didn't I think of this before? Like a librarian, like this woman was made for me, you know? And I love libraries. I mean, I like the atmosphere that's a little different from a bookstore, you know, a little louder. In some ways, like I would go from library to library, and I was like, yeah, I want to put Joe in a library, and I want him to have fun in quotes with a librarian.
You have the same narrator for all three books. You have
Yes.
Santina.
Fontana.
The first and the second book, because you mentioned you want things to come full circle. There was such a departure because in the first book, you know, Joe is so not social media, so not Hollywood. And in the second book, he sort of has a little shimmy into that world.
Yes.
Did you see that as kind of because I think at first there seemed to be some surprise about that. Did you see that as kind of like an aspect of his personality, like in a way how he wanted to become everything that he thought that Guinevere or Beck wanted in the first book? So he sort of was a bit of a chameleon. Did you see, was that what you were working with when you decided for him to go full swing into the world of LA?
Yes, I liked that he's someone who thinks of himself as so stable and so sure of who he is that I like to poke that and show how easily we can all drink a little Kool-Aid at times, you know? So for me, it was like him, and in that way also, because it's all about his mental gymnasium. So even as he's doing all of that and becoming part Hollywood asshole, he's thinking I'm better than all of you. And I love that dynamic. Those of us who like think that we're incapable of change and we know who we are, that we all have the ability to change in that way and to go through phases. And I like tracking his phases. So I liked seeing him become something that he just told us he would never be and looks down on. I love that dynamic. And that brought me into the next book of showing him think, no, I'm going back to the library, to books and all of that, because that's who he really is, you know.
In the Pacific Northwest of all places. It's funny because in a way he seems to always be somewhat looking down on people.
Yes, and
Yes.
I liked the idea of him attempting to go somewhere where he thinks that won't happen at all, like because he's always blaming everyone but him. Yep. And I want people who didn't read the second book to feel like they can pick this one up, because there are so many books in this world, so many books. And I did work to make it, hopefully, that you can get into that first chapter and maybe a little bit will be like, what is this guy talking about? But kind of like in the first book, he's talking about things in the past that you don't exactly know, but it'll all make sense. So,
but it's really cool because he's such an interesting character, because like, and the way you write him, it's just, I'm like, oh my God, like I get sucked into his world and his craziness, so to say. But I mean,
good.
I was talking, we always end up talking about like fan fiction, Jessica and I, and like other coworkers. And it's interesting because I know someone that actually like wrote fanfic based on your book and the TV show.
Yep.
And it was just interesting to kind of see, like, I was just like, oh, cool. Like, I love stuff related to what I like. But like his mentality, you don't see a lot of characters like him.
Yes, well, that I always thought of it as in taking place inside of his head and thinking we all have this world in our heads. And there's this book I've been reading lately, The Untethered Soul, and about that voice in your head. And I love the idea that you're talking to someone, you have no idea what they're walking away from. It's like part, you know, in Dumb and Dumber, when he asks if there's a chance and she's like, 1 in a million. And he's like, so you're telling me there's a chance. That's one of those mentalities that stuck with me, the way that you could say no to someone a million times and they will still think, but you're talking to me, you're paying attention to me. And yeah.
So this is actually a place I wasn't about to go, but one thing I think that I personally loved about the You books and the adaptation was how it was almost a deconstruction of the romantic comedy trope, which is very much what you were just saying. There was a trend a few years back of people recutting famous romantic comedies with the background music being somewhat horror.
Yes.
And it fits because almost every romantic comedy involves some form of stalking or somebody saying no a million times and then realizing that a no a million times is a yes. And as we've learned over the past few years, maybe that's not the healthiest mentality to be feeding to.
And I've been like always aware of that my whole life. You know, they said like that first book you're writing your whole life and then you get it all down. And I feel like I get to stay in that world of things I've been thinking about forever. Because yeah, so many romantic images are of someone crossing, you know, like chasms to get to that person against all odds and that. And so in his head, that's what he's doing. And
right. Yeah. It's really interesting to me that he's also in a way like this evolution of him almost becoming a sex symbol. I follow a lot of different, groups on Facebook. And there are people who just absolutely love him. They're like, oh, well, like, does your boyfriend love you this much? And I'm like,
I see those.
Whoa. What are your feelings about
My
that?
feelings are that even in like when there were advanced copies in 2014, before it was published, already there was this feverish reaction that made me so excited. You know, when you feel like, okay, what I was doing got there. And for me, the reading experience, like it's so intimate. You're so with him. So the readers for me, before there was a physical face associated with it, they loved being in there and they loved seeing themselves in it in different ways. And that's that you-ness of it coming in. Like we all do these little stalkery things. So it's kind of like therapeutic to see someone doing what you do and then boom, they're doing something you'd never do. And then a few years later to have a show and a handsome actor attached to it brings it to another level. Because for me, the TV is so different. You're watching him do things, right? But in the book, you're like kind of with him inside of him.
You're living in his head. And I said that to Stacy when I was reading it, if you recall. I said to her, it's really freaky living inside of this guy's head. And following his thread to why he thinks that first of all, why he thinks Beck is so worthy of his obsession, and then also like what he does to make sure that there's no other distractions.
Yeah.
Right. Well, that's what I love too. In a time, I feel like leading up to this, and we always hear like about people shrinking attention spans, and something that is, noble about Joe is that he has an attention span and he doesn't he doesn't go away. He gets like, he wants to quote unquote help this woman and he sees the best potential in her. And he also is compassionate. So to see all of these good qualities mashed up against all these bad qualities, I love that mix, because I think that it wouldn't be fun if he was some jerk who was just like, I want to control you. You know, he is that, but he doesn't think of himself as that.
So the control thing is interesting, because I think, and again, he was very different in the second book with Love, even though he was still Joe. And Love was just a very different character than Beck. Oh, absolutely. But in the just in general, you know, like his way of controlling, it's almost like these women are in a maze, like what, you know, like you're doing like an experiment with a mouse and they're in a maze, and you just keep putting up blocks for them to get to the exit. So it's like, oh, well, I'll just go this way and hang out with this friend. Oh, this friend is ghosting me for I don't know why. Oh, they turned up dead. That's so sad. Let me call my friend Joe and tell him how sad I am.
I love that two-way street, the way different people bring out different sides of you too. You know, like I liked that he sympathizes with Beck in the beginning because, hey, he's felt excluded by these kinds of people. And here she is feeling like she's never quite enough and has a little bit of a complex about that. But then anytime she gets along with him, he's like, well, now I'm going to have to kill them. It's that old, like, do I want to be a part of these people or do I want to get rid of them? And then with Love, someone who's so at ease in the world, I feel like I thought of Love as this kind of hypnosis effect where he's here, like he moves here and he knows no one, he has nothing, and he's in this terrible mood. And suddenly, bam, he's in Chateau, like on this patio and with these truffle fries. And it wasn't so much about the food, but like the warmth, the access. She gave him family, she gave him wealth, she gave him connections, she singled him out. And in that way, he's like, well, now, you know, you have chosen me. Like, I like the way he turns it on the woman. And you'll see a lot of that in You Love Me, of like, honey, like you chose me to work in your library. So.
Oh, that's really exciting to hear.
Yes. Sorry, not sorry. Is that what they say?
The name of his protagonist in this book is?
Oh, Mary Kay DeMarco.
So how did you begin crafting Mary Kay against the backdrop of the main? Because we know of the women in Joe's past, Candace, who I know it's different in the books than it is in the TV show. How did you begin crafting Mary Kay against the backdrop of the two women we've already met?
I wanted to get a Gen X woman in there, someone who kind of shares a cynicism a little bit, is a legit hardcore book person, and shares the memories that he has more, you know, and has his point of view, like someone who says things and he's like, yes, I say that. He has that kind of like a real hardcore intellectual connection with this woman. And I also wanted someone that he feels like he's not quite good enough for, because I think that's what also hopefully like makes the reader like, okay, like he's, in theory, this is, you know, these are all nice things. And I also love the idea of this woman like really owning this book space. And again, with that, like he can relate to her, but it goes back to control. Like we all know that feeling, like when you're excited about someone and, oh, you want to like take them, you know, and she's a little bit that way with him, but in a functional way. But any inkling of that, like he takes his permission to go on. But I wanted her to be, also she's a mom. And because Hidden Bodies ended with him wanting a family, I wanted him to meet someone who has a family. So that just adds more, like, here's this woman who represents everything he's never had, and she's fun. Like, I feel like in this, like you'll see, he has a lot of fun with her. And yeah.
As a librarian, that makes me really happy. I always, the librarian trope.
Being an old lady with a
stern
barn.
If Evelyn and the Mummy taught us anything, librarians are super passionate about being librarians and can be super fun and exciting. So
I wrote a short story years ago about a librarian who's like the town sex pot, and then something weird happens. But like I feel like that's more akin to reality, you know.
Yeah, there's a company I like that does scented candles, and one of their new ones for spring, because they do seasonal ones, is Sexy Librarian. And you're either an old prim and proper like crotchety old lady, or you're like the sex pot like trope.
You're taking the bun out of your hair and just like flipping
that's like
it.
the SNL sketch they did.
Right. were you involved a lot in the Netflix adaptation?
Well, we started at Lifetime, and years ago it was great where I'd finished You and Hidden Bodies. So they invited me to write an episode season 1. You know how it is, like when you're removed from something, you're a couple of years out of it. So it was like, oh yeah, I get to play with these toys again, and they want to play with these toys. And then to get to write 2 more books in the series, I pulled back a bit because I want to stay in this world and like keep with the books and make my deadlines. And there are only so many hours in the day, and I feel it, and it's natural, like the show's different, going in different directions here and there. So exciting to have it on Netflix and have like, memes everywhere, like you said before. And
we got to talk to Josh Mallerman about how he felt about Bird Box memes, because those were everywhere. Yeah. How did you feel about You memes?
I mean, I love it. It's wild. It's like, it's already surreal to me when you publish a book and people speak the language and know it. And then when you go to places that you think of as kind of going to get away from yourself and see something that you made reflected back at you, it's so wild and trippy. And I don't think I'll ever adjust to it. I love seeing the memes. I know I'm a big pop culture person. It just makes me happy to see people play with it. And
that's awesome.
So going back to what Stacey was saying about fan fiction, because we've been told that authors like never read fan fiction of their work. Are you flattered that Joe fan fiction exists?
Oh, I'm so flattered. Yeah, I don't read it like just I want people to be free to do what they want. I feel like all fiction starts out as a form of fan fiction. Like you wouldn't write unless you read, and reading things made you want to learn how to write and figure out what you're going to do. Like I remember being a kid and reading Are You There, God, It's Me, Margaret, and like shaking, like, how did she write this just for me? Like I want to write something for a stranger. Like I want someone to have this feeling that like, this is mine, this is just for me and no one else. So that makes me so happy that people get that feeling, I just I'm like, I don't want to read it because like, what if I'm doing something like that? And then,
It was Sarah Gailey. They said that author, Sarah Gailey, author of The Echo Wife, Magic for Liars, Upright Women Wanted. They were saying that not to send your fan fiction to an author because they want it to just be yours, and they also don't want
to be influenced,
which is kind of, I don't think, something that people necessarily think.
Right. Yeah, I see that. And to me, it's just back to that old creative freedom. Like I wouldn't want someone to hear my feedback on what they made because of mine, because I'm like, no, that's yours. Like, and I'm just one person. And
But that's really exciting that you love the memes, because that was one of the first things that came to my head when we first found out we were going to be talking to you. And then of course, I wonder
what did Josh say about the memes?
He said that he was, I think, away on vacation.
He was away and didn't know what was happening.
Right.
And then comes back from like, I forgot how long of a like trip, because they were like in a mostly remote location, and he comes back and is just getting spammed, like friends being like, do you know this is happening? And he was like, what?
Yes, that's a good, like, well, with us, we premiered on Lifetime in the summer a few years ago. And, it was great. We did all these events, and then I'm from Cape Cod, and on the beach, the planes going by with a banner, you on Lifetime. And it just didn't have the memes. Like it didn't get that kind of reaction. Like on an individual level, I heard from a lot of people who were really into it. But then what was trippy was that after a few months later, when it was on Netflix, I was in Vegas with my mom for Christmas when it started. And I was like, that's weird. Something called You is trending. Like, I wonder who, what it is. Like, I didn't even think, do you know what I mean? Like, who would ever expect that? And I remember being in a slot machine, like, oh my God. And I missed a little bonus round because I was just like, what's happening?
That's pretty wild.
Yeah.
How did it end up making the jump from Lifetime to Netflix?
I think that, Netflix, they're good at knowing what we want to watch and how to put it out there. Like, I feel like the binge of You is something like that is so good. And I think that part of it was like, this is the way we like to watch things, and we like to watch them when we want, how we want. Like, even now I'm watching the Real World reunion, but I feel my inner brat, like, why aren't they all there all at once? Like, like you put them all down. And I'm like, no, I used to love waiting for things and waiting a week. I mean, and I still love that with some things, but I think that it was the right click, the right fit, but nothing changed of what it contained, you know.
No, I think one thing that we have noticed, especially since you came out on Netflix, is just how TV has become the preferred adaptation of novels.
Yeah, rather than a movie.
Yeah, but I think you get to have so much more, right? Like I remember like when it was initial talks, and it was like, if it was a movie, I know Karen Minty probably like that was that part of the book where it was like, is this just dragging it out? I love it. I can't cut it. You know, and I had that accordion going on in my head. And it's, yeah, I feel like you just, and then you only get one. Like this way it grows over years. And that's so exciting to see. And you just, yeah, like the way that it happens constantly and someone new is watching it all the time. Yeah.
Karen Minty gave new meaning to Behind the Girl Who Got Away.
Yes, and I got to write that episode of the show, and it was fun because it's so different in the show than in the book. So it was like making a new Karen Minty and showing, yeah, different kinds of girls are the girl that got away, you know?
Right. No, that was great. I do think that that's wild that you wrote that episode, because I'm
like somewhere in New York, they're walking by each other like, who are you, bitch? Like
I loved how it worked out in both the book and the TV show, and I loved both Karen Minty's in both parallel universes.
Yes. Yeah. So that's the fun of me with TV, like you can stretch things out, you know, and see so many little details. And so yeah, there's just more, you know, it's a more is more.
A bigger sandbox that you can play in.
Yes. Yes. The same way, like I'm like when I'm writing U3, I'm like, okay, calm down, you get U4, like that one's ordered, so like there will be places for everything, you know.
Is this the last U novel that you're planning, or you don't know, you're not quite sure yet?
I'm writing the fourth one. I like it's same way with all of them, that like when I was writing you already halfway through, I was like, I want to bring him to LA, I want to see what he does here. And I wanted to write another one. And then when I was writing Hidden Bodies, I wanted to do more, but I wanted to take a break and write Providence. Like I really wanted to do something really different.
This is not, you know, because I think that both the U series and Providence are just so good. They're just so different. And I was so impressed by how different they were, because Providence was recommended to me, and I said, okay, well, I like you. Let me pick this one up and see it, but it was so different, and I just thought that it was so beautifully done.
Thank you. Yeah, I wanted to, yeah, I like that challenge. It was like, I'm always kind of intimidated by all things supernatural, and I wanted to play with that. It's like, it's the same way when I did you, it was like, I want to see if I can write a man voice and pull it off for that long. This, I was like, I want to write like many different perspectives after spending so many hundreds of pages in this one perspective. And I loved the idea of crashing them against each other like that. And I'm always impressed by that. And I know I like when books are different, you know, like I just read Red Widow by Alma Katsu, and I love her books. But I'm like, Red Widow, The Deep, The Hunger, like they're in different times and different spheres. And I love that. I love seeing writers like explore.
It's really cool to like, I agree with you. I like when people kind of explore different stuff. I have some, you know, favorite authors that stick to their tried and true. This is what, you know, I'm good at, and this is what makes money. This is what I'm doing. And that's cool too. But sometimes I'm like, what if they did this? Yeah. Yeah. It's cool that you do that. So thank you.
Thank you. Well,
I actually heard a rumor that Providence is going to be adapted. Is this true?
Sarah Gamble and Greg Berlanti and the team who make Uves are making Providence for Peacock, P for P. And I'm told next year, I hope so. It's like one of those things, like I'm so excited. I don't even talk about it much because I'm like, I don't want to jinx it. Like I can't freaking believe it, you know?
Yeah.
So that's another, yes.
Did you have any input in the casting of You, and do you have any input for the casting of Providence?
With You in the beginning, I watched some tapes and I would tell them someone and they would be like, probably not. And then they'd send me the tape. I'm like, how are you guys know? Like, how did you know that this wasn't right? So yeah, I'll never forget the first time I saw Penn and Elizabeth together, and I was just like, oh my God. And the first time I saw Benji's tape, like remember where I was standing and everything, and the chills. They're so wonderful at that. I had this boss years ago who was always like, let the experts do what they're the best at. And I really believe in that. So it was nice to know that this is what they do. They've made so much wonderful television. They know how to pick the people. So I'll like throw in my ideas, but know that they're going to know what to do, you know?
Do they let you know when they're veering from what, like the book material?
Yeah.
Or is it like a surprise?
Yeah. Well, I like with every book, like I'll go into the room it's worked out. Well, with Hidden Bodies was already published. I knew they were going to go out. Like I remember when I was in the room and Sarah was like, we just found out we can't go to Vegas. And I feel like Hidden Bodies, especially, you know, was so sprawling, and they're in the water, and he's in Mexico and back in Rhode Island. Like it's all over the place. And I understand like the narrative when you're taking the episodes that are each, you know, limited, and you want to have a beginning, middle, end, and you change one thing, you're going to change other things. So with You Love Me, I went in about a year ago, I think, like a little over a year ago. And I kind of told them about the book, but it was a draft. You know, when you're doing something and you think you're done, but you're not done. So I'm like telling them about different chapters. And as I think of this now, I'm like, yeah, that didn't end up staying in the book. You know, like, and then I sent them a copy, and they, you know, and there'll be parallels, but I don't like to to say, oh, I really want you to keep this in. Do you know what I mean? Like, I like that freedom. And also I feel like, again, once they're two different worlds, like let them be two different worlds, you know, because when you read a book and you watch it in your head, that experience is just, it can't be duplicated on the screen, and you got to watch something on its own space and in its own way, you know, like some of my favorite adaptations are different too. And
it's really cool to talk to you, because I remember when the book came out, I was reading like a sort of similar title book. I was reading The Book of You. And I was like, oh, that's cool. I'll put that on my to be read list. And then I was like, oh, like, I really want to read it. And like, I think I took the book home, like the physical book, maybe like 3 times. And I just never was able to like pick it up. So like I'd put it down, and then like I'd go do something. And then I'm like, I got to return that. I'm going to get late fines. And then finally we were like, oh, this is coming. Like, you know, I remember when it was coming to Lifetime, and I was like, cool. I definitely now need to read the book. And then I was like, oh my God, it's on Netflix, even better. And then I ended up listening to the book in the car. And I have to say, both, you know, the series and the novels like are so bingeable, as you said. Like, I'm just like, I'm not going back into work. I'll be like 5 minutes late. It's okay. Like, no one cares.
I've seen people online like, I called in a sick day tomorrow to read the book. I'm like, good. Like that's the dream thing for me to hear, because that's yeah,
like you're writing
from the librarian.
It's just like you want to know more, explore more, and like how he, you know, he changes. It's like a chameleon of how he changes his persona to fit who he thinks is like his dream girl, which is interesting to just experience because you're in his head.
Yes, and I think all of that too, of like, it's part of his like not having a strong social network of friends and family in real life, so that gives him a little bit of freedom. But that freedom is, you know, dangerous there. Yeah, when you don't really have any roots, you know.
Yeah.
Yes, but yeah, and I like when you find that moment that's right for you with a book. Like so many books, I'll get them, and then a month later, I'm like, now is the moment for me in that book. You know, that's a. And in the book, he makes this section in the library that's called The Other Ones. So like there are big books by, you know, well-known authors, but then he's putting out the lesser known books, and Mary Kay very much likes that.
As a librarian, I like that.
We like to do that too. So
you know, that big one that's
bravo. Yes. Well, this is awesome. I know everybody is going to love this book. Everybody is waiting for it. Please come back and tell us about You 4.
Yes, that means I'm going to finish it, right? Yes. Right.
Yeah. Well, you know, there we go. So, so once again, this was Jessica with Syosset Library. My librarian co-host was
Stacy.
And our guest was
Caroline Kepnes. Thank you, Jessica and Stacy.
Thank you so much. This was awesome.
We are going to close this chapter of Turn the Page.
Okay.
It's time to close this chapter of Turn the Page. Join us for the next episode.